Livia had nearly found sleep when the light had appeared. The first night in the orphanage carried strange emotions for her, unfamiliar yet close to a past that she had once held. Life had taken trust from Livia, like it had been taken everywhere else, but habits of survival waned here, their edges dulled by the safety of a roof overhead. Her cot, though narrow and thin, was still far removed from the cold cobblestones of the capital. Sleep beckoned, warm and enveloping, tenderly lowering her eyelids with the promise of true rest. And then the door opened. "Wait, child." Livia recognized the voice of Sin, the headmistress. "Come." Afraid to lose what respite she had found from the streets, Livia obeyed and sat up. Her legs swung over the side to land on the cold floor, and she walked into the light of the hall. Blinking, Livia took her place alongside the other children, all of them ranging from 8 to 10 summers. They had arrived here today, freshly collected from the streets of Noxus. A pair of brothers, 3 scrawny urchin boys who clutched each other's hands in grubby unity, and Livia. Both groups shuffled away from her, retreating to the familiar. "I know the hour is late," said Sin as she walked down the line of little faces, "but there are many demands upon the time of our patron. Still, he wishes to welcome the newly arrived." There was something within Sin's words that Livia could not place. "It is an honor." It was then that the children had noticed him with a start, as though he had appeared out of thin air. Tall, slender, clad in a wealth Livia had never known, the patron approached them. Sin demurred into the background, her expression impassible. Slowly, the man walked from orphan to orphan, his pale eyes casting them in an odd scrutiny. He passed the brothers without a thought. Livia felt her pulse quicken as he paused, the eyes falling upon her, and felt it slow again as he continued on. The trio of urchins bunched together, each defending the others, and the patrons barely spared them a glance. "Her," the man said to Sin, his voice low, silken. Sin's arm was on her shoulder now, leading her to another room. It was empty but for a single chair. "No harm will come to you," Sin said, an attempt to dispel Livia's fear. "It is an honor," she repeated, closing the door behind her. Livia crossed to the chair and sat in it. She watched the door intently, the sole means of entry into the room, only to notice a moment later the shadow stretching out from behind her. The patron. "Please," he said, raising his hands as she bolted to her feet. Livia did her best to contain her fear, to remember what Sin had told her. "Think I'm here to hurt you?" he asked, his voice languid, cultured. Livia shook her head, but it was far from convincing. He feigned puzzlement, laughing softly. "My dear, has life not done enough?" He circled around in front of her. "No, my child, I'm only here to hear about your life, and what has brought you here." He gestured kindly to the chair, and slowly Livia took her seat. "I'm from Berlin," she began. "Yes," he nodded, urging that she continue. "War took Papa," said Livia, trying to keep her voice level to betray no weakness. "And so we came to the city. Mama went out to find work, but after 4 days, we stopped waiting for her to come back. It was just my sister, Vera, and I. I kept her safe. She fought her voice, but it faltered. And then Vera took sick. I couldn't protect her, and then I was alone, he said softly. Livia's chest swelled with a tide of pain, of loss. Alone, she repeated, and a tear struck her cheek. There, he breathed. She recoiled as he reached toward her. Close your eyes, he said, his voice hypnotic. Focus upon that feeling, the pain. It is mounted for you in this unforgiving world, nowhere to go but bottled up inside. Feel it rise up above your neck, slipping up over your nose and your ears. It threatens to swallow you, but just at the precipice, it yields. Face it and feel it break against you. That is strength. Turn your mind upon it and allow it to drain from you. She let the pain flow out of her in sobs, feeling the cold of glass against her cheeks, softly touching beneath her eyes. A torrent of despair taking her breath, and then it was gone. Livia opened her eyes. Thank you, said the man, and Livia noticed a vial in his hands. For sharing. You, Livia dared to ask, seeing something that she could recognize in her patron, despite everything else about him. You're alone too. He took his eyes from the vial and glanced at her. I have seen much of this world over many years. Yes, almost all of it alone. Livia sniffed, looking up at him. Will it get better? For you, he smiled gently, his eyes glimmering for a moment in a gentle show of sadness. No. She is unharmed, Sin asked as Duke stepped into the hall. Duke arched an eyebrow. Were you harmed as Sin all those years ago when it was you in that room? He tilted his head, producing a thin ampoule in his long fingers. Sin's eyes locked to the slender tube of glass, its frosted length dulling the contents to a soft ruby. Sin snatched the ampoule, her eyes darting as she secreted it in the sleeve of her robe. Until next time, my dear, Duke chuckled, and then he turned and laughed. The moon was full that night, bathing the Rome streets in radiant silver hues. Duke stopped at the fountain in the orphanage's empty courtyard, dipping a finger into the still water. Whirls of crimson bloomed from his touch, rushing across the shallow pool until it was a depthless claret. Stepping briskly up to the lip of the fountain, Duke dropped into it without sound or splash. Duke rose from another pool within the dark halls of his manor, emerging dry as it was though he had never touched the liquid. A chill wound through the yawning cavern of shadow and stone arches, brushing over shuttered windows and priceless artworks collected over 1,000 lifetimes. His step was light across thick rugs, barely disturbing the layers of dust that had caked them as he ascended a staircase. For a moment, his thoughts had lingered on the child, Olivia. Doubtless tonight had been a strange experience, but he had seen enough mortals to know this night would not define her life. She would live and then die like all the other little sparks around him. Her name, her face, and their interaction would slip away from him, as they always did, to where he wondered if they had even existed at all. People. The creatures surrounded Duke yet stood upon the opposite side of an impossible gulf, tantalizing and impermanent. A thin, crooked smile came to him. He was melancholy tonight. He rolled the vial of tears in his fingers. The studio beckoned. Maudlin thoughts aside, of all the countless mortal lives that he had encountered, there were a select few that Duke had refused to forget, and so he labored to do what his mind could not. To remember them, those brief moments that their lives had touched, what felt like an eternity ago. In this case, it was less than a millennium. the memory springing suddenly into his mind despite the vast time since they had last met. For this one, he chose paint. It was nearly finished, a work most would not find out a place alongside the masterworks adorning his lonely halls. He had certainly had the years to hone a craft. All the details were done. The gentle tumble of auburn hair, the tan skin, features that alone were commonplace, but combined affected a demanding regal aura. The expression unthinkable loss. It was all there save the whites of his eyes. Duke opened the vial, tipping it into a pot. The innocent tears mingled with the paint and with the touch of his brush came alive when laid upon the canvas. Nothing else in all of his travels could match the splendor that it wrought. What was his name? He found that he could not remember. The absence stabbed at him, a name gone but at least the face preserved. The whites of his eyes would keep his memory here. Like a lonesome soul he sought me out from beyond. Duke mused with a smile. More melancholy but fitting perhaps. After all, there was nothing in the world as beautiful as sadness.